Hello everyone, I'm Tony from Arkitect Fitness, and in this video, I'm going to talk to you about why you should consider competing in powerlifting, even if your fitness goal is something different, like fat loss. All right, let's get into it. A few years ago, there was a big push in the fitness industry to start training clients like athletes. And while I appreciate the sentiment, I don't necessarily agree with that, primarily because athlete is an ambiguous term. Take into consideration a gymnast versus a cyclist. Both are athletes, but their sports require them to have different physical attributes and skill sets. That means you cannot train someone like an athlete unless you have a specific sport in mind. So why do coaches want to train their clients like athletes? Well, I think it's a mindset thing. When we think of an athlete's training, we think of fun exercises, purposeful, exciting, challenging. And when we think of exercising for the regular gym goer, we think of things like walking on a treadmill, riding an elliptical, punishing ourselves for eating unhealthy foods. There's definitely a different connotation between training like an athlete and just being a regular exerciser. But your training has to have purpose. You can't just do different exercises for the sake of doing different exercises. Now, everybody should consider competing in something, and there's tons of reasons why, but here are just a few. Number one, it gives structure to your training. By having a specific task you are training for, it is much easier to come up with a game plan to get you from point A to point B. Number two, it motivates you to train. A lot of times, it's not that clients don't know what to do, it's that they're lacking the motivation to do it. And number three, it's just fun. Competing in sports is fun, training for a specific goal is fun, and having fun is a big part of staying motivated. Now, there are a ton of sports that you could compete in. Running like 5Ks, golf, swimming, tennis, squash, softball leagues, basketball leagues, hockey leagues. You name it, there are plenty of options for people. But I think a really good choice is the sport of powerlifting. Now, if you're not familiar with what powerlifting is, it's a sport where competitors are broken up into categories by gender, age, and weight. Then each athlete has 3 attempts at the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift, taking their best attempt from each and combining it for a total. The athlete with the highest and heaviest total in their bracket wins that division. It's a remarkably beautiful and simple sport, and here's why I think you should consider competing in it. First of all, the competition events, the squat, the bench press, and the deadlift, are staples in any good training program. These are fundamental exercises, and those 3 movements alone will give you almost a complete full body workout. That means that most people who are going to the gym just to get in shape or feel a little better or lose a little weight are probably already doing these 3 movements or some variation of. If you aren't squatting, bench pressing, or deadlifting in some capacity in your training, you are blowing it, and you might want to check with your coach as to why you're not. Secondly, the barrier to entry in powerlifting is pretty low. It's a very accessible sport because almost every gym in the country has the tools you need to train for the sport of powerlifting. All you really need is a barbell and some racks for squatting and bench pressing. If a gym has those essential things, and I know there are gyms that don't, I won't name any names, Planet Fitness, but most gyms are gonna have the equipment that you need to train for it. So you don't have to go out of your way to train for the sport of powerlifting or get access to the equipment that you would need. Like I mentioned before, there's something really elegant and beautiful about the simplicity of the sport. It literally is just to see who is the strongest in those 3 events. And that's really kind of badass. The 4th reason why you should consider competing in powerlifting is because it is extremely empowering. And this goes for everyone, but in particular for women. A lot of times women are discouraged from lifting weights because they're told that they're going to become bulky or manly, which is not true. But a lot of women shy away from the weight room. When women start lifting weights and competing in powerlifting, they often find it incredibly empowering to see actually how strong they can become. And there are some women that lift some very, very impressive weights. But just generally speaking, for everybody, if you're lacking a little bit of self-confidence, getting stronger is a good way to boost your self-esteem. Powerlifting is also unique in that it's one of the few sports where each competitor is on the competition platform by themselves while competing. If you think of individual sports like boxing or mixed martial arts, even though those aren't team sports, the competitors are still on the competition stage together. In powerlifting, when it's your turn to go out and lift, it's just you and the barbell and the crowd watching you. And I know this sounds a little bit intimidating, but after you go out for that first lift, the first time you do it, you'll realize it's actually a huge rush. Number 5, the powerlifting community is awesome, and there's unbelievable camaraderie in the sport, unlike almost any other sport I've ever seen. And of course, in any sport, you are competing against the other athletes. But in powerlifting, it's almost more like you're competing against yourself. Even though when you go to a competition, you do want to place as high as you can, the name of the game really is to always just lift more than you did last time. So therefore, it almost becomes you against you. And that's sometimes the best type of competition. I've been to events where someone's grinding out a lift and the entire crowd, including the other competitors, are cheering that person on. It's an awesome community, and it's a really good one to be a part of. All right, the 6th and final reason why you should consider competing at powerlifting is because the training for powerlifting is really good for fat loss. Now, old school train of thought is cardio is for fat loss and lifting weights is for building muscles. But nothing could be further from the truth. In reality, the most important thing to losing fat is being in a calorie deficit. That means eating less than you burn every single day. And when you do that, you will lose some muscle mass as well. But if you're lifting weights, especially seriously like a powerlifter would, you are going to maintain more muscle as you lose weight. That means more of the weight that you lose will be from body fat and less of the weight that you lose will be from muscle. And no one really wants to lose any muscle. Another important thing to remember is that a body with more muscle tissue will burn more calories at rest. That means if you have 2 people who both weigh 200 pounds, if one of them has more body fat and one of them has more muscle to make up that 200 pounds, the person with more muscle will naturally burn more calories throughout the day than the person with more body fat, even though they both weigh the same total amount. So strength training and training for powerlifting can help put a little bit of healthy muscle on you to boost your resting metabolism. And lastly, powerlifting does produce the type of physique that a lot of people do find appealing or use as their goal physique. Of course, this is completely subjective and personal preference. However, if you look at kind of common standard beauty norms, if you will, in the modern day, the muscular physique of a powerlifter is usually considered more aesthetically pleasing than someone that may be a distance runner or swimmer. But again, this is totally personal preference, not saying one way or the other. Just throwing it out there. Okay, hopefully now I have convinced you that you should compete in the sport of powerlifting. And if I have, the next question is, how do you get started? Well, there are a few different organizations that host powerlifting competitions. We prefer to compete in USAPL, and there's a few reasons for that, but mostly because it is the biggest and most popular powerlifting federation in the US, and therefore their competitions are most readily available to people no matter what area that you're in. So the first thing you would have to do is register to become a member of a powerlifting federation. In this instance, we would recommend USAPL. Once you are a member of USAPL, you can then register to compete in a competition. And the price of competitions varies on who's running it, but they usually run somewhere between $50 to $100 to register. From there, the only equipment that you will need to compete is a singlet and some shoes. You're gonna see powerlifters wearing things like wrist wraps and belts and knee sleeves. You can choose to wear all of that, but you do not need any of it to compete. As long as you have a t-shirt, a singlet, and shoes on, you are good to go. If you are interested in competing in the sport of powerlifting and you are local to us, we do have a powerlifting team. And if you are not local to us, we do offer remote coaching. There are a few gyms in the Concord area that offer powerlifting training, but to my knowledge, we are the only gym in Concord that has a USAPL registered team. Our next meet at the time of this video is in January 2020. If you are interested in competing in that competition, reach out to me as soon as possible. And if that date has already gone by, reach out to me anyway, Tony@arkitectfitness.com. And if you're interested in competing, we'll help you get there. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.